Okay, now I will read what is on this chart. Mass and plane in opposition. Saturn is the one outstanding example in our solar system of the battle for supremacy between electric centripetal force, which desires to retain the spherical appearance of form in mass, and magnetic centrifugal force, which desires its disappearance. The greatly accelerated rotation of the equatorial belt of this expanding sphere of relatively low potential tends to counteract the effect of gravitation, and is expressed by throwing off rings from portions of Saturn's surface. The rings are in the plane of Saturn's maximum radiation. Radiative preponderance is struggling to retain its expression in plane, while the subordinate generative force of the rings is attempting to express itself in mass. This they will eventually do. The rings will become satellites of Saturn when the swing of the poles sufficiently increases its angle. This is what has occurred in the case of Uranus. Jupiter is even now preparing to throw off a series of concentric rings which will also regenerate into new satellites. Now this chart is explaining the rings of Saturn as the necessary effect of its position during the return journey from mass to plane. We have a new chart now, and I will read this page. Generation of mass. Generation decelerates rotation. All mass is generated into spheres from plane by preponderance of centripetal force and degenerated back into plane by preponderance of centrifugal force. Form of mass is controlled by the position of its magnetic poles, which define the polar magnetic basis. If the polar magnetic bases of the planet are defined by A, the sphere is flattened as indicated by A. If the base is extended, as at B, then the sphere is even more flattened as indicated by B with a little symbol by it. Generative cones disappear into their axis as they contract their points of north from the centers of the harmonic circles of the inertial planes to the centers of masses, and as they transfer the harmonic circles themselves to the ecliptic planes of masses. Disappearance of rotation in electric pole. Degeneration of mass. Degeneration accelerates rotation. When form in mass has reached its perfection in the sphere, generative cones have contracted to disappearance in the electric pole, and radiative cones have expanded to disappearance in the ecliptic plane. At this stage, generation ends and degeneration begins. Rigidity relaxes at the ecliptic belt, rotation increases, the ecliptic belt bulges, volume expands, radiative and gravitative centers expand, radiative cones disappear into ecliptics as they expand their magnetic basis from the inertial planes to the equators of masses. That's the maximum of rotation in the ecliptic. Evolution of mass. Electricity evolves mass into the form of a true sphere, and magnetism devolves it into plane. The process is orderly and periodic. Now I've read those two charts, and to begin again at where we left off. The spiral waves are formed, and all spiral motion is born. Thus is eccentricity of orbit a necessary stage in the evolution of perfection of orbit. Thus is the eclipse a necessary stage in the evolution of the circle. Thus is the unsteady gyration of precessional motion of expanded plane in all mass a necessary stage in the evolution of perfection of gyroscopic motion in one plane. Thus is the amorphous and irregular crystal a necessary stage in the evolution of the perfect cubic crystal. Thus are the polar surfaces of all masses the regions of transference of the inertial cold of non-motion, and the equators the regions of transference of the resistant heat of maximum motion. Thus is the concept of energy in the one point of north in inertia divided into its opposites of expression in sex in the appearance of 2 points of north at the overtones of every wave, in order that the dimensionless universe of simultaneity in inertia may become a universe of dimension with sequential intervals of reproduction of its productions. Thus does the sexlessness of inertia become bisexual in its reflection of motion. It will be remembered that the harmonic circle of a wave is its magnetic base, which, when transferred to mass, is the ecliptic of the wave and of every subdivision of the wave. It will be remembered that when the electric pole of a wave is reflected in accumulated mass, it ends in the gravitative center of the mass and of every subdivision of the mass. There is but one electric pole and one magnetic base of unchanging constants to the volume of every wave. When the entire volume of a wave, as measured out by pole and plane, is transferred to separate masses through motion, the electric pole and magnetic base is reflected in every whirling subdivision of that volume. In every wave, the constant of its cone volume in inertia is the constant of the volume of all masses in motion within the wave. The position of the charging poles represents the increase of electric force. This increase is in the direction of north at the overtone of the wave, and toward the reflections of north at the gravitative centers of all masses of the wave. The expansion of the magnetic base represents the increase of magnetic force. This increase is in the direction of south at the harmonic plane of the wave and toward the reflection of all of that harmonic plane in the ecliptic areas of all masses of the wave. The contraction of the charging poles represents the generative force, which expresses its conquest over the magnetic force by the contraction of area of orbit, by deceleration of rotation and acceleration of revolution in individual masses. The expansion of the magnetic base represents the degenerative force, which expresses its conquest over the electric force by expansion of orbital area, by acceleration of rotation, and by deceleration of revolution of individual masses. The electric pole of generation gathers separately moving masses together into the bond energy of rigid bodies by the mutual force of attraction of charging bodies, and gives to each mass of the wave a portion of itself. Electricity then expresses its ultimate conquest of magnetism by a reversal in mass of its original desire for action through motion, and simulates the desire of magnetism for non-motion. The magnetic base of degeneration expresses its ultimate conquest of electricity by actively asserting its repellent force. It more vigorously pries apart the bond energy stored in mass by its preponderance of centrifugal force. Magnetism then expresses its ultimate conquest of electricity by a reversal in mass of its original desire for inaction, and simulates the desire of electricity for motion.